The stars over Aegis 9 looked like they always had, calm, eternal, full of promise. Then they blinked out. One by one, the colony's sky turned black, not from clouds, not from nightfall, but from the growing shadow of falling fire. It began as a distant hum, like static in the wind. Then came the flash. The ground shook. Birds screamed. A farmer in the eastern fields dropped to his knees, shielding his daughter as a white-hot beam tore across the horizon, slicing through mountains like paper. By the time the second strike hit, the colony's alert systems were already lighting up. Sirens wailed. Holographic warnings flashed across windows and streets. People ran, mothers grabbing children, workers stumbling from factories, students screaming in schools. But there was nowhere to run. Orbital bombardment is not precise. It does not discriminate. It does not knock. It simply burns. Above the colony, the Zevari warships hung like jagged knives. Their hulls shimmered with alien metal, carved with marks that meant nothing to humans, except death. From orbit, their captains watched the chaos below through curved glass. One of them, a tall, spined creature with silver eyes, tilted its head in confusion. "There is no resistance," it said in its native tongue. "They do not fight. They're humans," another replied coldly. "They've forgotten war." Down below, flames consumed everything. Hospitals crumbled. Drones tried to carry wounded children, only to be blasted midair. People screamed into radios that had no signal. Others just screamed. In the colony's control tower, a young technician named Maya Calvo locked herself into a comms room. Her hands were shaking. Blood dripped from her temple, but her voice was clear as she forced the last beacon online. "This is Aegis 9, she whispered into the mic. "To anyone out there, we are under attack. No warning, no declaration. Civilians, children, we're being wiped out. Please." She paused. The roof trembled. "Please remember us." The message pulsed into space, just as the tower was hit. Back on Earth, in the heart of the Terran capital, 100 diplomats stared in silence as the footage played across a massive galactic chamber. The stars in the background twinkled coldly. The message ended with static. Then a single line of Terran text appeared, spoken in a voice no one recognized, but everyone understood. "You woke the dragons." A long silence followed. Then a senator, pale and shaking, turned to the others. "Is that real?" General Lath, tall and grim, nodded once. "It's real." Another senator stood, his voice tight with fury. "Then what do we do?" Lath didn't look away from the screen. His voice was low, heavy. "We call them back." "Call who?" Lath's eyes narrowed. "The ones who never forgot how to fight." The Terran Senate chambers were silent, filled with a kind of quiet that felt like it might swallow the room whole. The weight of Aegis 9's destruction pressed against the walls, thick and suffocating. Delegates, scientists, and military leaders stood around a massive holotable, their faces flickering with tension and uncertainty. Above, on the grand balcony, the flags of Earth swayed gently in the artificial wind, their colors muted, like a funeral drape. "Is this a response we can contain?" a diplomat asked, voice high with fear. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Admiral Neris, the veteran commander of Earth's defenses, stood with his back straight. He had seen wars come and go, watched empires rise and fall, but this was different. This was something beyond war, something darker. "We can't contain this," he said, his voice like a stone breaking. "They're testing us, and they know they can. The Zevari think humanity's weakness is our civility. They believe we won't retaliate. They think we're still too peaceful. You're suggesting we strike back immediately." The senator's voice quivered. "Against an entire." "It's already too late for peace talks," Neris interrupted. "Aegis 9 is gone, and if we don't respond, they'll be coming for more." At the back of the room, hidden in shadow, an older figure stood, watching the debate with a sense of quiet authority. His sharp eyes seemed to see through every argument, every plan. He hadn't spoken since he entered. He didn't need to. Finally, General Lath, his posture rigid, almost mechanical, turned to face the Senate. He was tall, built like a warship, and scarred from years of combat that had long since erased any softness from his face. We've called in every diplomat, every strategist, and yet, he said, our enemies still don't understand one simple fact. His voice dropped, heavy with intent. We didn't lose Aegis 9. They just woke something they'll regret. A shiver passed through the room. Everyone knew what he was referring to. Leith pressed a button on the holotable. A new image appeared, a black and white map of Earth's long-hidden history, a buried name beneath a layer of redacted files, classified information no one had spoken about in centuries. Draco Protocol, Leith said. For those who thought humanity would stay docile, there was a collective gasp. Some shuffled uncomfortably, others exchanged nervous glances. A young senator, trying to mask his fear with bravado, stepped forward. You're telling me. I'm telling you that we have assets. Leith interrupted. We have people, and we have the ability to make this war personal. No more sitting at the table and pretending we're not capable of taking our enemies down. The room went still. It was the kind of stillness that only came when something was about to shift, when the weight of a decision was about to break the surface. Who? Asked the diplomat, his voice barely a whisper. Leith's eyes darkened. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Her name is Rika Thorn. At the sound of the name, there was a ripple of recognition, followed by the silence of respect. And fear. General Leith turned to the far corner of the room, where a door slid open with a hiss. From the shadows, a woman emerged, tall, muscular, her eyes like steel. Her body moved with the grace of a predator, and the scars on her arms told stories of a time when humanity's enemies learned the hard way what it meant to provoke them. Rika Thorn, the once forgotten commander of the Dragons of Sol, had returned, and as her boots hit the floor, she didn't need to say a word. The message was clear. The dragons were back. The Hellway covered like a predator above the ice world Krathus, its massive hull reflecting the pale blue glow of the frozen moons. The ship was silent, its engines purring with a soft hum that seemed out of place in the brutal void of space. Inside, the crew moved with purpose, hardened men and women who had seen wars, losses, and things far worse than death. Rika Thorn stood at the command center, her hands gripping the rail in front of her. The cold blue light of the screens bathed her face in a harsh glow. Her sharp eyes studied the terrain below, the icy surface of Krathus dotted with buildings and research outposts now abandoned by their former occupants. It was supposed to be a neutral world, a place where no one fought, no one bulled. But the Zevari had chosen it for something darker. Report, she barked, her voice cutting through the quiet of the command deck. Brax, her second in command, a towering cyborg with glowing eyes, turned toward her. His face was a tangle of metal and flesh, scars and circuitry. He nodded, his mechanical arm clicking as it shifted. Recon satellites confirm Zevari presence. 3 large transport ships are incoming. No other ships in orbit. Thorn's jaw tightened. A distraction. They know we're coming. We hit them hard. Fast. No chance to regroup, Brax suggested, his voice low, mechanical. No. Thorn's gaze hardened. We need information. We don't strike until we know exactly what they're doing here. We'll walk right into a trap if we don't move smart. She tapped her fingers against the rail, her mind already working the angles. Prep the ground teams. We'll infiltrate the main base on foot. I want eyes on their operation before we make our move. A technician at the back of the room raised his voice. General, we've been hearing rumors about a special weapon being developed, something that could turn the tide of the war. Thorn glanced over, her eyes narrowing. Special weapon? Do we have intel on this? The technician shook his head. No hard data yet, just whispers. But we're picking up unusual energy signatures from the far side of the base. Thorn's thoughts turned sharp. If it's a weapon, we can't let them deploy it. She turned back to Brax. We move fast. We move quiet. No mistakes. Minutes later, the crew had donned their dark, stealth suits, blending into the shadows of the ship's corridors as they prepared for the drop. Rika's fingers moved over her gear, a custom plasma rifle slung across her back, a combat knife strapped to her leg, and a small device that buzzed quietly in her pocket. The silence of the Hellwake was deafening, as if even the ship itself knew the gravity of what was coming. The bay doors hissed open. A violent rush of cold air flooded in as Rika led her team down the ramp and into the snow. The ground was barren, the snow like glass beneath their boots. Far in the distance, the shadow of the Zevari base loomed, a jagged silhouette against the pale sky. Rika's heart pounded. This was no longer just a mission. This was the beginning of something bigger. A war. And the dragons had been awakened. The ice of Krithis cracked beneath Rika's boots as her team moved in silence, their dark suits blending with the shadowed snow. The Zevari base ahead was a looming fortress of steel and ice, built into the side of a frozen mountain, its lights flickering weakly like dying stars. The air was thin, biting, and yet, to Rika, it felt like nothing more than the calm before a storm. 10 meters to the entrance, Brax's voice came over the comm, his heavy footsteps muffled by the snow. His mechanical limbs moved with eerie precision, each step calculated, as though the metal within him was more human than the flesh it had replaced. Rika raised a hand, signaling for the team to halt. She squatted down, scanning the terrain with her sharp eyes. No movement, just the cold, unyielding quiet of the world around them. It was too still. "Something's wrong," she muttered under her breath. Her fingers hovered over the small device in her pocket, a jolt of nervous energy running through her. She hated the feeling of being hunted, but this was different. There was an intelligence behind the coldness of this place. The Zevari were waiting, and she could feel their eyes on her team, even if they couldn't see them yet. Ahead, the entrance to the base stood open, a wide gaping mouth in the side of the mountain. The door's edges glowed faintly, an unsettling blue. Rika motioned for Brax to take the point, and without a word, they moved forward. As they passed through the threshold, the temperature inside was even colder, and the smell of machinery and stale air stung her nostrils. The halls were dim, but the shadows twisted in unnatural ways. Rika's instincts screamed at her. Something wasn't right. Before she could process it, the trap sprung. The doors slammed shut behind them, locking with a sound like thunder. Red lights flickered, bathing the walls in an ominous hue. An alarm blared, deafening in the narrow corridor. "Damn it," Rika cursed, her hand snapping to the rifle slung across her back. "Get to cover." But it was too late. From the darkness ahead, figures emerged. Zevari soldiers, their sleek armor glinting in the red light. They moved with precise military discipline, weapons drawn, eyes cold. "No choice now," Rika growled. Without waiting for orders, the dragons opened fire. Plasma bolts zipped through the air, striking the first wave of soldiers. They fell in silent heaps, but more appeared, flooding in from the corridors, overwhelming the narrow space. Brax threw himself into the fight, his cybernetic arm whirling with deadly precision as he knocked a soldier to the ground with a crushing blow. Rika's plasma rifle roared to life, the shots a steady rhythm as she advanced, cutting down enemies with deadly accuracy. Every pull of the trigger felt like a beat of her own heart, steady and unyielding. "We need to move," shouted Brax, his voice distorted through the comms. Rika nodded. She didn't need to hear him to know that time was running out. Behind them, the massive base was now alive with sound, screeching alarms, the thundering of boots on metal floors, the relentless hum of machines. The Zevari weren't just going to fight. They were going to throw everything they had at them. "We push forward. No stopping. Stay in formation," Rika ordered. But she knew they had walked into the lion's den, and now they had to burn it down. The deeper they moved into the Zevari base, the more the air seemed to thicken. Every step felt heavier, the walls narrowing, closing in on them as if the very structure of the place was alive, watching them, waiting. Rika's breath was sharp, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. The red lights of the base flashed erratically, casting an eerie glow on the steel walls. Ahead, Brax slammed into a corner, motioning for the team to stop. They crouched, weapons raised, as the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the halls. Rika's sharp eyes scanned the shadows, fingers twitching on the trigger. "Too quiet," Brax muttered, his voice low, almost a growl. "They're up to something." Rika nodded. She could feel it too. This wasn't just a base. It was a trap, a maze designed to wear them down, to break them. But they had no choice. They had come too far. Their mission had already shifted from infiltration to survival. The Zevari weren't just occupying this place. They were building something dangerous, something they couldn't let reach the stars. They moved again, silently this time, past empty hallways and abandoned control rooms. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the base. The doors slid open with a hiss, and they stepped into the darkness. What they found inside was worse than any of them could have imagined. A massive cylindrical tank stood in the center of the room, its glass walls cracked and smeared with a viscous, glowing substance. Inside, a creature floated, massive, terrifying, and unmistakably alien. It was a hybrid, stitched together with parts of various species, each more terrifying than the last. Its skin rippled with unnatural energy, like a living weapon in stasis. This is what they were building. Brax muttered, eyes wide. A weapon. Rika stepped closer, her boots making no sound on the cold metal floor. Her mind raced. This thing wasn't just a biological weapon. It was a living nightmare, a creature designed to tear apart anything in its path. They'd be sending this into battle, into human colonies, to burn everything to the ground. No, Rika breathed, her eyes narrowing. We stop this here. As she turned to signal her team, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, resonating hum vibrated through the walls, followed by a crackling sound as lights flickered above. The creature in the tank began to stir, its enormous form shifting, twitching like it was waking from a long slumber. Get back, Rika shouted, but it was too late. With a deafening roar, the tank exploded, sending a shockwave through the room. Glass shattered, and the alien hybrid surged forward with terrifying speed, its monstrous limbs thrashing. The air filled with the sound of screeching metal and the violent crackle of energy as the creature broke free from its prison. Brax lunged forward, his massive arms reaching for the creature, but Rika grabbed him, pulling him back. Too powerful, she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. We need to destroy its core. Now. The creature roared again, the sound shaking the chamber. It was free, and it wasn't just coming for them. It was coming for everything. Rika clenched her fists. We finish this. The creature's roar reverberated through the chamber, shaking the very walls of the base. Its monstrous limbs flailed, sending chunks of metal and debris crashing across the room. Rika's heart raced, but her mind was cold, calculating. There was no room for fear, only action. The beast's glowing eyes locked onto her, burning with a primal hunger. It was a perfect killing machine, a creature forged in the fires of war and twisted into something far worse. Its body rippled with unnatural energy, its form a grotesque fusion of alien biology and weaponized monstrosity. Rika's team scattered, weapons raised, taking cover behind columns and shattered walls. Plasma fire flashed across the room, striking the creature's armored hide. The shots left nothing but scorch marks, barely scratching its surface. We can't stop it with firepower, Brax shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. We need to hit it where it hurts. Rika didn't waste time with words. She sprinted toward a nearby control panel, her boots pounding against the cold floor, scanning the holographic display for anything that could give them an edge. Her eyes flicked to the corner of the room, where the beast lumbered toward Brax, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Get clear, Rika shouted. Brax didn't need another order. He jumped back, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws as they cleaved through the spot where he'd been standing. The beast let out a guttural growl and turned its attention toward him, its body rippling with energy. Rika's fingers flew across the control panel, typing in commands with practiced precision. The room trembled again as the system responded. A low hum filled the air, and a series of lights blinked to life on the walls. The beast seemed to sense the change, its movements becoming more frantic, more erratic. We're running out of time, shouted Brax, his voice filled with urgency. The creature lunged forward, crashing through a row of support beams as it charged at Rika. She didn't flinch. At the last moment, she triggered the sequence, and the floor beneath the creature gave way. With a deafening crash, the creature plummeted into the lower level, landing with a thud that sent dust and debris flying. Rika gritted her teeth, adrenaline surging through her veins. She had one shot at this. Now, she shouted, turning to Brax. We finish it. They followed the creature's descent, their weapons raised and ready. The lower level was dark, lit only by the flickering lights of damaged equipment. The creature was down, but it wasn't finished. It writhed in pain, snarling as its energy core began to hum louder, vibrating with an intensity that threatened to tear the entire base apart. We have seconds before it blows, Rika shouted. Without hesitation, Brax moved first, charging forward with his mechanical limbs swinging. He grappled with the creature, using his superior strength to hold it down. Rika didn't waste a second. She aimed at the core, the glowing center of the beast's chest, and fired. The shot hit with a resounding crack, and the creature let out a bone-shaking roar. It convulsed, its energy core starting to destabilize. The room was filled with a blinding light. Move, Rika screamed. They turned and ran, the explosion behind them sending a shockwave that rattled their bones. As they reached the base's exit, the ground shook violently. They barely made it out before the entire structure began to collapse, the force of the explosion ripping through the base like a wave of destruction. But as they looked back, the massive plume of fire and smoke billowed into the sky. It wasn't just victory they felt. It was the weight of what they had just unleashed. A new war. A fight that would not be forgotten. The firestorm of the explosion had barely begun to fade when Rika Thorne and her team hit the frozen surface of Krithis with a heavy thud. The shockwave had thrown them across the snow, but there was no time to waste. The mission was a success. The Zavari's weapon was destroyed, but that victory came at a cost, one that still felt heavy in the air. Rika rose to her feet, wiping the soot from her face. The familiar sting of battle fatigue was already creeping into her muscles, but she ignored it. There was something else in the air now, a crackling tension, a weight that didn't belong. As the team regrouped, their eyes all turned to the horizon, where the wreckage of the Zavari base burned in the distance, a massive column of smoke and fire reaching for the heavens. Is it over? Brax asked, his voice strained, though his cybernetic limbs had already begun to move, recalibrating from the impact of the blast. Rika didn't answer immediately. She knew what he was really asking. Is it over for us? For humanity? She could feel it too, the answer that echoed in the cold, in the silence that followed the chaos. No, it wasn't over. She turned toward the horizon, narrowing her eyes. No, she said, her voice low and resolute. This is just the beginning. The deep thrum of engines filled the air as the Hellwake descended from the sky, its sleek form cutting through the atmosphere with a grace that belied its size. The ship's ramp lowered slowly, the sound of it echoing across the ice. Rika motioned for her team to board. We're not done yet, she said, her voice firm with a renewed purpose. As they boarded the ship, the familiar hum of the Hellwake enveloped them. The cold, harsh world of Krithis faded behind them as the ship ascended, leaving behind the burning remains of the Zavari base. Rika took a deep breath, and for a moment, the weight of the situation seemed almost manageable. Rika, Brax began, but she cut him off. Don't say it, she said, looking at him with unwavering determination. I know what you're thinking. I know what's coming. The screens in front of her flickered to life, displaying maps, enemy movements, and classified data. The Zavari weren't done. They were scattered now, fractured. But this destruction had been a message, and Rika knew exactly who it was meant for. It was a message to Earth, to the human race. The Hellwake systems blinked with new data, highlighting a new fleet, a new plan. The Zavari were mobilizing for war, and they had already begun assembling their forces in a dozen systems. Their target was clear: humanity. It's time to go on the offensive, Rika said. She moved toward the command chair, settling into the seat with the confidence of someone who had already accepted the cost of the fight ahead. We strike before they can regroup. Her fingers tapped across the console, sending orders to the ship's eye. The coordinates were set. The next target was already in their sights. A world on the brink. A colony that the Zavari had already set their sights on. It would be humanity's first offensive strike against their enemies in this new war. As the ship's engines roared to life, Rika allowed herself one brief glance at her team. There was no turning back now. This isn't just a war, she said, her voice like the rumble of a storm. It's a reckoning. The Hellwake shot forward, and as the stars blurred into streaks of light, Rika Thorn knew that the dragons had returned to the skies. The Hellwake tore through the stars, a streak of fire against the endless black. Inside the ship, the crew moved with quiet urgency. Rika Thorn stood at the helm, her hands steady on the controls. The map on the console flickered, displaying their next target, the human colony of Astronova, a bustling world on the edge of known space. It had once been a haven, a shining example of human expansion, but now it was marked for destruction. The Zevari fleet was on its way, and there was no time to waste. "We've got an incoming window," Brax said from behind her, his voice deep and steady, even as he scanned the readouts on his own console. "They'll hit Astronova within the next few hours. If we don't stop them now, it's over." Rika didn't respond right away. Her mind raced with strategy and possibility, weighing the odds. She knew Brax was right. If the Zevari took the colony, the war would shift. The balance would tip in their favor. Humanity would be forced onto the defensive, scrambling for a foothold in a galaxy that no longer wanted them. Her fingers hovered over the controls. The ship was fast, but she needed to be faster. The Zevari had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but Rika had something they didn't: the element of surprise. "Prep the fighters," she finally said, her voice cold and precise. "We go in hard, hit them before they even know we're here. This is humanity's fight now. We'll show them what happens when you push us too far." Brax gave a sharp nod, already relaying the order to the fighter bays. The rest of the crew moved quickly, preparing for the attack. Their faces were set, grim but resolute. Rika could feel the weight of their trust, the bond they shared as a team. No matter what happened next, they were in this together. The ship's engines hummed louder, and the stars outside seemed to blur, streaking into lines as they entered warp speed. Rika's heart beat in time with the pulse of the ship. She'd been in battles before. Too many, in fact. But this one felt different. This time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about fighting for something bigger than themselves, the future of humanity. A series of beeps from the comms broke her focus. Brax's voice came through, tense. "We're almost there. Zevari fleet is on course. We've got one shot." Rika glanced at the screen, her eyes narrowing. The enemy fleet was massive, a black wall of warships and dreadnoughts, but they were scattered, disorganized, not expecting a counterattack. "This is it," Rika said, standing tall in the command chair. She tapped the console, sending the order to the fighter pilots. "Take them down. Hit them where it hurts." The Hellwake dropped out of warp, and the battle erupted in an instant. The fighters launched, diving into the chaos of the enemy fleet. Plasma bolts lit up the dark void as the human forces struck with precision, targeting the Zevari weak points, their ships exploding in bursts of fiery brilliance. Rika watched as the fight unfolded, a storm of destruction swirling around her. The odds were stacked against them, but she didn't flinch. Humanity had always been the underdog, always outnumbered, and yet here they were, fighting back. This was no longer just about winning a battle. It was about making the galaxy understand that humanity wasn't some helpless species to be crushed. They were the dragons, and their fire had only just begun. As the Hellwake dove into the heart of the enemy fleet, Rika whispered to herself, her voice fierce, "This is just the start."